Hi, hope you're having a great day wherever you are. Today, I just wanted to touch on this one news which is relating to XRP and Ripple. Coinmetrics first released this report about 2 days ago, right? And their findings is shocking because basically their title is, right, there is a discrepancy between what was announced publicly by Ripple in their Escrow's release schedule and what was actually happening in the real blockchain, right? So let's find out what it is, yeah? And my own opinion of whether as an investor in XRP, should you be concerned or not, yeah? Okay, let's move on. Now, the key point of a discrepancy was that, right, they basically saying the release of the coins of XRP from the escrow is much faster, right? It could be as fast as 21 years sooner than what was actually initially planned or initially announced when they first announced the escrow. So let's first give some quick recap of what is this escrow. So this escrow was first introduced back in end of 2017 when they want to have a very predictable timeline of how much XRP token will be released to the market. Why? Because XRP, unlike Bitcoin, is all pre-mined and there are 99 or 100 billion units of XRP tokens only, but they want to have, they cannot release all of them into the market, but rather they chose to have a very predictable release schedule. And the way they want to do it is using an escrow model and publish a quarterly report so that everything is very transparent and anyone can choose to audit their report versus their ledger. So, and this is exactly what Coinmetrics have done, right? And the plan was that each month 1 billion units of XRP will be released from the escrow, right? And so it will be used to, do whatever funding that's required to promote the coins by the Ripple company. So they want to clearly separate Ripple, the company, versus XRP, the token, using this escrow mechanism, yeah? And so the plan was that, right, they want to use this escrow method to have 55 contracts. So there will be 55 months where the remaining XRP will be released to the market. Yeah, so that was the plan. So what happened was initially they announced that they're going to have 1 billion units of XRP each month. So it's 55 contracts. Yeah, but now what happened is that, right, they actually following February, after February 2020 to July 2027, they are changing their actual implementation to 2 contract of 500 million XRP units each, but which in a way is still very similar. The total is still 1 billion units, and then what is not used by the company will be then put back into the escrow at the back of the queue. So this one I do not think is a major discrepancy, but here is where the major discrepancy is. And if you look at the chart, right, so basically they found that just in 2 recent quarters, one is in Q3 2018, they found that the reported, right, they actually released 3 billion from the escrow. Returned is 2.6 billion, right? So then remaining is 0.4 billion. So that means they used 0.4 billion, that they returned 2.6 billion. But in actually on-chain record, they only found that only 2.5 billion is being returned in the Q3 of 2018. And similarly, so there's a difference of about 0.1 billion, yeah? That's 100 million units of XRP being the discrepancy. And similarly in Q1 2019 as well, reported was said that they returned 2.3 billion units of XRP, but in actual on-chain in the ledger, they only found 2.2 billion units of XRP is being returned. Now, this will basically result in this. Because you have to assume something. So you have to assume, let's say, if each month continue on, 50% of the XRP release will be used up, and then the remaining 50% will be then returned back to the escrow. They found that, right, there is a discrepancy of quite a lot in 9-year mark. That's the biggest difference, right? Almost like more than, so like 15 or 18 billion difference in terms of the faster release of the coin. So the red line is using this actual escrow queue mechanism, which is the one, this one, right, which is basically if they follow the on-chain and assuming these 2 quarters, because the rest of the quarter everything tallies except these 2 quarters were the one that they want to highlight, right? Just really it's just 2 quarters alone, but then they are extrapolating it to say that if every quarter is like this kind of mismatch, if this kind of discrepancy, then potentially you are going to see 21-year faster release of the token to reach the 99 billion mark, which is the maximum supply, but then you are at a faster release. Now, so when this report was released, they already disclosed that they tried to get in touch with the Ripple team, but they have yet to gotten a response, right? And then they released this first. So they were transparent about that. But at the same time, after they released this report, David Schwartz, which is the CTO of Ripple team, yeah, he actually replied to them saying that the timeline, right, is really because of a timeline issue. They say, what does that mean? That means that if a March escrow, right, if March escrow, they release 1 billion units and then they returned, if the amount that is not returned in March, if they return in April, that will consider in a Q2 event, which means the report will not yet be released, right? So forever there will be a lag like that, yeah. So basically he is saying then it's really just a timeline issue. It's not so much and it's also how frequently they publish the report, right? Because they only publish it quarterly, but then they actually do the escrow release and return monthly, right? So there's just a timeline issue that they are saying. So it's not a real discrepancy, but it's just a timeline issue. Yeah. So that's good that they actually clarified. The other thing I want to highlight is, so assuming coin metrics is correct and the red line is what it is eventually, right? And so it's definitely much faster than the blue line that was initially planned, but is it so bad for an investor? My opinion is no. Why? Because you see, ultimately, the total supply of the coins, right, of XRP in the market will only be 99 billion, right? There will be only a cap amount. So that is eventually converged. Just that at the near term or medium term time period, there will be more XRP released into the market. So that is actually bad, because more tokens released sooner in the market basically means, right, more supply, right, versus whichever demand, right? It basically will depress the prices actually even more in the near term or medium term. So in a way, that is actually not good for both Ripple, who actually hold quite a bit of XRP coins, right? And so in that sense, it's not really a bad thing, I think, right? Because ultimately, very important to know is that there's a cap, and that is very important, because why is cryptocurrency introduced in the first place is because fiat money can be printed at no extra cost, right, by government, just at their will, right? If they say they want to stimulate the economy, they just want to use this method of getting more money out there so that people can spend more, can borrow cheaply. That's what they do. And that's what they have done since the last 10 years, since the last global financial crisis. They have done that. So there's no cap in the fiat money that can ever be produced. But in this case, in XRP, it clearly shows, even if Coinmetrics is correct in their analysis, it still shows that there's still a cap of 99 billion, right, of XRP tokens ever to be released. So in that sense, I still find that the argument of this cap, right, which gives a good value to a coin that has scarcity, because it's going to be ever fixed at that supply, right, is still very, very valid, right? So that's all I want to highlight. That's the main point I want to highlight in this video. The other thing is, I find it weird, right? I mean, the thing is this, your kind of report, right? Honestly, they only found discrepancy in 2 quarters, which actually means, right, most likely is the same occurrence, which means what happened was is cumulative effect. Is probably the same occurrence, because in Q2 probably you will see this number metric, because if it's a timeline issue, as what David Schwartz explained, then it makes sense. Yeah. So the other thing is that so it should be clearer in the sense that they only found discrepancy in 2 quarters and not like every time, right? So that is very, very misleading. The other thing is that they said that they reached out to the management. So in trying to determine whether these findings were accurate or could be explained, Coinmetrics contacted Ripple through a number of different channels but did not receive a reply. Now, to be more so the thing is this, Ripple team have always been positioned themselves as the more professional, the more transparent company. In fact, they're the most transparent company out there in the crypto world, because they actually publish a quarterly report of what they do with their tokens. Yeah. And of course, anyone who is knowledgeable enough, or if you're not knowledgeable enough, you can hire people who are knowledgeable enough to actually check the ledger, right? So all this is open source, so people can check. So the thing is, to make their own report more credible, Coinmetrics should have, my opinion, Coinmetrics should really have put a proof of their email or text messages or whatever other ways that they reached out to Ripple as a proof to be here, right? So that people can actually know that they did really reach out to Ripple, right? And I think that is important, because if you want to say something like this, right, and if you didn't reach out to Ripple before, then I think it is really not professional on Coinmetrics' part, right? And if they said that they have, they should back it up as well with just proof of them reaching out. It could be just an email sent or whatever. That's my opinion. So in that sense, right, you know where I stand when I say this, right? So so that's all I have for today. So in the end, summary, what does it mean? So if you're an XRP investor, my opinion is that I don't think there is a cause for concern, really. And because honestly, the Ripple CTO also quickly responded with an explanation, right? So, and honestly, if you look at this report clearly, it is not every quarter they have the discrepancy. Really, it's just that 2 quarters, and I think is probably the same reason, right? It's just basically the same transaction, that because the funds are returned the following month, and then that's why it then will be recorded in the following quarter, which then, because of timeline issue, we haven't seen that quarter yet, but, so in that case, I really don't think it's a big cause for concern, but this kind of title, this kind of report will really cause, will really spread fear, uncertainty, and doubts. Yeah. So with that, I hope you benefit from this video, and I hope you learn a little bit of something. Let me know what your thinking is, and if you subscribe, please, if you like this, and thank you so much for your time. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you.